Okay, I'm sure some people will come in here. Thanks everybody for joining us on our Wednesday webinars. Today we're going to cover integrations, the various places and things that you can integrate into the lead system. I'm joined today by my little bro, Brett. He's going to be the expert to lead us through a lot of this. So please, at the end, of course, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to put those across the chat along the way. We have Taylor from our team that's on here as well. And then, of course, if there's anything specific that you want to discuss, we can always set up a call to dig into more complex details. So just taking a brief look at our agenda for today, we'll cover what we mean by integrations, talk a little bit about ourselves, but not too much. We don't like to brag. And then we'll get into custom deliveries, outside services, webhooks. Then we'll talk a little bit about reports and API specs. And then we'll end with some of those other integrations like Twilio and your SMTP. So I'm going to kick this over here, introduce Brett. He's going to share his screen and lead it through most of this call here today. Brett, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I've been at Boberdoo since 2008, client services manager. And today, when we're looking at these integrations, it's just one of many of the different types of things that we can do inside the Boberdoo system. So while what we might describe might not fit perfectly into your use case, there's lots of variations that can be done in all the types of these setups. So we're, it always can work with you to come up with the needed integration to get your use case going.
Thanks. So let's start with outside services. So just to give a 30-second on what outside services is, it is a tab that allows you to bring your own credentials so that you can build your own tech stack, whether that's for lead scoring, claiming consent, or as a little tangent, our recently released bid modifier, which allows you to build rules to modify those bids on your pings. But for the purposes here, we're talking about the outside services. So, Brett, what does the outside service look like in terms of an integration for building your tech stack for lead scoring?
So the outside services come into play on the sold or matched to your buyer. So this allows you to put these different types of tech stacks, as you call them, or different integration checks that can be used before you sell the lead. So a couple examples that we're looking at here, Anura, DNC Scrub, RPV, Trestle, Active Prospect, Jernaya, all of those are very common ones we've done plenty of integrations with. And so as far as getting those set up, it's as easy as first having an account with whatever service you want to run. So if it's Trestle, you'd have to have an account with Trestle. Anura, you have to have an account with Anura. But we've styled the setup inside the system so that you don't really have to know how to set anything up. You just need to know what those credentials are. And so what I mean by that, I go to the credentials tab here under outside services. When you click add new set of credentials, you can select what service you want to integrate with. So for example, if I choose the Blacklist Alliance Scrub V3, it dynamically sets the credentials so that all you have to do is paste the value here that you get from Blacklist Alliance. We have already set the type and the proper field name to be this so that you can just simply copy and paste the value. Compared to if I select a different integration, like Jernaya, now they make you do your account code, your account key on the ping, account key on the post. So it is just, as Scott referred to, BYOC, bring your own credentials. Copying and pasting them into here allows you to then have that integration be able to be configured and ready to set live.
So Brett, once you build
yeah.
that, yeah, once you build that, what do the rules look like in the outside service itself?
So now if we go back to the services tab, all right, we're back here. Let's say this was a brand new system. You don't have any outside services set up. It will look maybe like this lead type, right? There's just nothing here. You're going to select to add a new service. And so here it then gives you that list that you're looking to configure. And so to continue with the Jernaya setup that we referred to last time, we would click Setup Jernaya. And so the first setup is, okay, what leads should be sent to Jernaya? Should it be all sources? You can just select that first one and move on. But if you want to limit it to only certain sources, you can do select which ones to include, or you could do all of them except select what sources to exclude. This is just tailoring which leads should be sent through. Let's say for this purpose, you want to do it for all of them. We'll click all, we'll click next step. Now the integration rules, these are unique and specific to the service that you are looking to run. Jernaya has their own set of credentials and services for rules, just as if RTV will have different options to look at because each service is checking different information. Jernaya, for example, checks, the snapshot in time of that lead token, how long were they on the page, max hops, overall result is based on your rules you set inside of Jernaya. But the flow goes, the lead comes in from your vendor or from your website. It would then flow through to the Jernaya service. It sends the data to Jernaya. Jernaya returns back a response saying, hey, for this lead, it's 30 seconds old. It's, this is how long it's been there. And then based on these rules you have set, your boberdoo system can then accept or reject that lead. Where if you set rules for, certain criteria and it doesn't meet that criteria, that means you don't attempt to sell it to the buyer. At that point, you would then return back. You can return back a custom response to the vendor to your form. You can have the normal unmatched. That can all be configured here. So just as a little, aside here, this is again for Jernaya only. But these bottom rules that we see are universal for pretty much all of them, and that's kind of based on the results. What do you want to happen next? Okay. So for this purpose, right, you want to choose what your lead ID token field is in your system. You would select whatever appropriate value. Might be lead ID token, might be universal lead ID, whatever it is in your system, you can just simply select it from the dropdown. But again, these next options are what should I do if the lead ID token field is empty or it's invalid? Maybe someone sends just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as the Jernaya token, right? Do you want to continue the next service? Do you want to reject it and send it to review, send it to decline? So you can see you have a lot of different options of how you want to kind of disposition this lead based upon what happens. If it ends with success, you can continue to the next service, skip the next services, what to do if there's an error.
What would be a use case there for like skip in that if the lead is if the call is a process is a success?
So for skip would be particular clients we've had in the past where maybe you have a couple different services that you run. Okay, one is more expensive than the other, so you run that one first, and if that one's a success, you don't care, you don't even want to run the next one, right? So you would choose skip the next one in that case. That way it runs successfully for the high paying one. Well, that's good enough for you. You skip the next one so you don't run a different service again. Whereas in the setup where if that first one fails, though, right, now it continues to the next one to then further check that lead, maybe some more, or maybe a different service.
Sounds good.
So service ending with a success, ending with an error, invalid. These all fall into the processing logic of what should happen with the lead, right? If I click next step, I guess one last option here is just the maximum number of API calls you want to set for this particular outside service. You don't want to run it more than 100 times in a day. You could simply put 100 there to cap that out. The final step is kind of just a summary, right? Here's what you've set up so far. I want to save and activate it, so it's working right after I click this button, or I want to save and not activate it. In this case, yeah, I want to save it. It's not quite ready to set live yet. I will maybe want to go back and set more rules or set different sources, and then come back. And at any time to turn it on, all you have to do is simply click the button here to enable that. Here you can see total number of calls today that have come through, and even the month to date, which is a newer option we just put in.
So Brett, if you can go back to the home improvement lead type, you touched on something interesting, which is if you're running multiple checks and they cost different amounts. I get your use case, but I guess I might be a little cheap. I would want to run the cheapest one first and then only run the more expensive ones if I need to. Is there a way that I can configure that here?
So yeah, that's all comes down to these integration rules, right? With what you want the flow to be, okay? And so let's use give me an example of the
I guess
first
more
one,
like the order then.
right? Yeah, the order. For the order, that is just a matter of dragging and dropping them. So let's say you want an order to run first, you can just simply always put that to the top. This will run in sequential order based on how you have it aligned here.
So I guess if that's the case, we could probably build dependent calls and use the results from a previous call in the next call that we make. So like if a service needed some information from, let's say, the Anura response in order to make the next call, we could string them together.
Yes, exactly. We have options. We can save fields. So let's say in the response from any of these services, they return back a number of different data points, right? Um, those data points can be saved into the lead type itself. So as I navigate away from here real quick and just go to the lead types tab, we could add new fields into the lead type, not so your vendor can send them in, but so that we can capture the values from the response and write them into a field to be used for filtering, used for data retention, whatever you want to do there to capture extra information from the outside service that can be used and saved with the lead itself.
So that outside services is like more about integrating for incoming stuff or to make that outbound call. What about custom deliveries? So, sorry, go ahead.
So yeah, custom deliveries are kind of the flip side of it, right? So this is on leads that are coming into your system. We send it outbound for that data to be checked before it's delivered to the buyer. Custom deliveries under the settings and then custom deliveries wizard tab. This is where you can have integrations for sending data from your boberdoo system outbound to anywhere you want. I would say for the majority of boberdoo's lifespan, the custom delivery wizard has really focused on like, hey, I got buyer ABC that wants to get the leads sent to their CRM. And so we create the delivery to buyer ABC system, and that's what the custom delivery is. Delivers all that data to the buyer in the format that they need to get it. However, new improvements into the system have allowed us to make more, allow us to use the custom deliveries in other ways. So what I mean by that is, let's note that this delivery right here is delivery ID 295. If I go to the webhooks notifications, we now have the ability to assign custom deliveries as the delivery method or the trigger method for the webhook. So right now I'm looking at the page, right? We see account login blocked. When this happens, we send an email to this email, right? Saying the login was blocked or whatever we want it to say in the email body itself, right? But the trigger of when this email is sent is when the account login is blocked. We now have that same capability. Let's add a new. Here we have the new start search here as well. So you can simply begin to type keywords, and that will then show you which webhooks come up. So account login blocked in this case, I'm looking for. And so here we choose email, right? That's the normal way. Another way was we did have the ability to do like post get. So this is for simpler integrations. You could put the posting URL here, and you could put, the field name and what you want the values to be, the magic strings here on the right. But if you have more complex deliveries, the delivery wizard is your best friend. It allows you to do a lot more things with it. And then instead of choosing post get, you'll select function. And then for the function, we'll get back to the Slack webhook, but the one we're looking mainly here is the delivery wizard. So simply, I'm going to put 295. I believe that was the name of 295 is the delivery ID that I want to use to trigger when the account login is blocked. So function is added. I can see it right here. Account login blocked. It's not active. All new webhooks are not active by default. But I can see here when this happens, the trigger is going to send this custom delivery. And so whatever is set in this delivery code is what's sent then when that trigger happens. So it just gives you a lot more flexibility now. Not instead of just sending an email, right? You could send a post to some other system to track these options or to further report on more options.
So Brett, what would be some good use cases here? So I know we have clients that work together, Boberdoo to Boberdoo, that use it for refunds.
Correct. That is a very easy, straightforward use case that this can be utilized with, right? So every Boberdoo client system has their API specs here. And one of those is request refund per lead. So it's an API. Instead of developing some type of Excel file that has all of the returns for your last month, and then sending that to the person you bought the leads from, this API could be triggered to be called to then request those refunds in real time as soon as they're requested, and then they can be approved or denied in decision, by that recipient then. So this would be a very easy integration to get set up to have two Boberdoo systems or any two systems really um, to talk back and forth with each other to handle these types of refund requests or refund approvals or refund denies.
So I guess it would be any type of lead updating then too. So that same process could be applied to like CRM status updates if you're getting the feedback loop, or even probably even for clients that have more advanced needs for reporting.
That's probably the next best use case in my opinion, is using this to close the feedback loop. As we've touched upon many times before, the feedback loop is when you sell that lead to your buyer, and the buyer then closes that lead or whatever if that ends up being a good lead and they close the deal, the buyer being able to update the seller, the Boberdoo system essentially, that this lead was closed, that can then trigger back to the vendor who originally generated the lead to let them know, hey, this lead closed. Maybe that sparks some, hey, this sub ID is performing really well. Just that feedback back and forth allows the leads to be.
All right, cool. Well, we've looked at a couple of different places that we can apply the custom delivery, the filter sets, and webhooks. So let's get into the meat of it and spend some time in this custom delivery wizard, Brett.
All right. So
first off, who has access to this? Does everybody?
yes, every user Boberdoo has access to the custom delivery wizard page. Before you hop in and start making edits, though, you know, just a bit of fair warning, right? Like changing something in an assigned delivery would or could impact live set lead sales. It can mess things up. So just a bit of warning that if something's live, making changes to it will make changes to a live delivery. We have been trying to establish a process where new deliveries, hey, if someone comes back and says, hey, for this delivery, we want to make a new update, we actually add new as a copy and make the change in the new one. And that way, whenever you're ready to assign the new one, it can be done. And if for some reason it doesn't work, you can always roll it back to the previous one. So my bit of advice, if you ever wanted to work on a delivery that's live, always add new as a copy and make your changes in the copy.
That's good advice.
So kind of just going into this here, the new delivery I have set up here, we're just going to click edit just to go in. To add a new one, all you're doing is click add new at the top. You get the same screen here that you'll get if you click edit. This is just choosing what type of delivery it is. Is it an XML? Is it an email one? SMS? Is it a get post? 99% of them are going to be the top one. But just to kind of explain what that means. So let's go back to the main page here. I'm going to click edit on this existing one. Like I said, it's to get post. All I do is click continue. So the main meat and potatoes of the custom delivery can fall into 3 or 4 options. So I understand there's looking at the page, it can be very intimidating, right? There's lots of fields, lots of text. What does this do? What does this mean? I can honestly say that you almost don't need to know 90% of the things in here. This delivery wizard was kind of made over the years, and as new options came to light or new requests were made, we would kind of just add a new option here. Okay, now it had, hey, a new delivery needs to have JSON as an array. Okay, we made this option in here as a drop down. Hey, this other delivery needed an option to make it sure that the response was case sensitive. And so it's just more and more things are added. But the main things I want to show you here today can be broken down into 2, 3 different options that you want to key on when you make a delivery. So the name, this is what shows up in the drop down when you're selecting it in the lead filter set. Or if you assign it to a webhook, that's the name that shows up in that description. So it's just your reference here that you want to use to name the delivery. The next most important thing is the gateway URL. This is where the posting URL goes. So every custom delivery has a URL, which is essentially if you think of like a letter, right? The posting URL is the mailing address. This is where the data is getting sent to. If they have a test URL, you can put the test one here, and you'll see when we go to actually do tests, there are 2 different buttons you can click. So I'll explain in a second. So here, where the data is going, and then the next main thing here is the delivery mapping. Okay, so there's delivery hard-coded fields and values where you could send the field and a value, and it will send campaign ID equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 every single time. That's what the hard code means, sent it the same way every time. But the delivery mapping, this is the second most important part of any custom delivery, because this is the type of data that the receiving end is going to get. So on the left-hand side are all of your Boberdoo fields. Okay, the bolded ones are ones that are required. So meaning every lead that comes into your system always has a first name, always has a last name. It may not have an address though. And then the right box is you're just simply typing in the field name, or copy and pasting the field name from the buyer's spec. So here, The buyer needs it in this format: first name, all lowercase, one word, last name. They have postal code instead of zip, phone instead of primary phone. They need to have the dashes in the phone. So you're just kind of like doing the mapping of what the buyer needs to get based on what comes into your Boberdoo system.
Where do you get that information, Brett?
This will always be supplied to you by the buyer that's looking to have the lead be sold to them. This is something that they will have access to. It's either going to be a link or some type of PDF file, but it's always something that they will have access to on their end that they will need to provide to you.
All right.
So we
So
have the field mapping. Sorry, one last part here: field mapping, and then to close it all in, the successor spot. So this is how Boberdoo knows to mark the lead as sold and matched to that buyer. If they return back something that says the word success, we mark it as sold, match. If they return anything else, we mark it as an error. So that's how the Boberdoo system then determines whether that lead should be marked as sold to that particular buyer, yes or no. When I'm done, I can scroll down and click save. You can see it listed here. And as far as testing, you can click the test lead button here. This kind of gives you a pseudo form that can be filled out. Whatever you type in here is what is then sent in that test lead. And then there's two icons here to send in test mode, which will send it to the live or send it to the test URL, and then send in live mode, which will send it to the live URL. I click it here. This kind of gives you that real time. Hey, this is not a real URL, right? So it gave me an error here. But you can see first name John, last name Weird, postal code 60610. So all the deliveries can be really tested right from this page to make sure they are working 100% before you go and assign them into a delivery or into a webhook.
Brett, if you had a lead company, what would be your test process for a new custom delivery?
For every new custom delivery, we want to test until we get a success return here. And then that test should always be confirmed by the buyer. If the buyer is not confirming the test lead, there's no way you should be sending it live, because either something's not right and that's why he's not confirming it, or maybe you're not on. And so it's we've seen some horror stories where clients have tried to turn live before they were ready, and then some reporting or numbers can get off. So my biggest tip and my biggest recommendation for any delivery is to always test and always confirm.
All right. Let's go back in there and take a look at, we have a couple of questions about the delivery wizard itself, and then we'll come back. But I would say the biggest takeaway is test, test, and test again. So, you had mentioned testing in the test mode. I would even go one step further and say you get the success in the test mode, then you submit a live lead either through the delivery wizard or an actual live lead in the system, and confirm that one live lead before going live for real. And then, if you ask Brad, the owner of Boberdoo, who might be a little bit more cautious than even myself, he would say put in a low 1 to 5 per day lead limit in the filter set for the first week, so that you can confirm those numbers and have that reliable, or that security, knowing that that integration is solid, and it's not just solid on one test but across multiple leads.
Right. It's important to note that I go back here. Let me kind of test for another one. Let's see. This when we're testing, right? We're not actually sending a lead into the Boberdoo system, right? And then having it flow and go to this buyer. We're literally just testing the buyer's endpoint directly. So this lead, this test is not on your lead stage in Boberdoo, just to make sure that this is kind of like internal testing only to make sure that the code and everything works. But then to Scott's point, a live end-to-end text is always helpful um, to make sure everything's perfect. Again, though, not always capable of having that done. Not all buyers have test systems, so it is on a case by case basis, which does make these, integrations, uh, you troubling to work with because they can be unique, right? So one setup might not work for the next setup because they just have a different options or different requirements.
All right. Well, if we can go back in, let's take a look at. There's some questions, and I do too, about ping post. So, what makes the delivery ping post?
So what makes the delivery ping post? So by default, it is direct post. But in the middle of the page here, below the posting URL for the post, below the response for the post, there's an option here, is ping post delivery. And you'll notice when I set this to yes, all of this new yellow appears, and everything in the yellow box is the ping information. So the URLs for the ping, what method, and then the ping response. The ping response is usually where you have the dynamic bid, dynamic lead ID that needs to be captured. So that all can be done here in the response section. So if I change it to be Jason, and then I want to capture the ping ID, I want to capture the price, I want to require the price for success, I want to make it so if the price that they return back is less than 250, it will Boberdoo will mark that as an error. So even though the buyer says, "Yeah, I want it match success," and I offer $1.99, since the minimum here is set to 250, Boberdoo would consider that an error and not use the bid as part of the success. So as far as the ping, it's all set up here. But then at the bottom for the delivery mapping, now you have an extra drop down here. So for these fields, what stage should they be sent on? I know that the zip code needs to be sent on both the ping and the post. The name, though, should only be sent on the post, right? Task ID, I want it on ping and the post, ping and the post. And so that way it only sends at the different stages based on what you manually select here.
All right. Um, anything with I know you talked about like capturing the price and the minimum. Is there any other ping post tips that help to prevent like post rejects or unmatched pings from a technical standpoint, um, as opposed to like a lead scoring or duplicate issue?
Um,
Like what happens if a buyer responds with a bid of zero?
Gotcha.
Is that just using the minimum price there?
Exactly. So if you had require price for success, yes, and you were capturing the price value, but they returned back a price of zero, and you didn't have anything set here, well, we captured the price. We captured a value, right? So the price value of zero would be used. That's why I would say in general, we always have our programmers, every custom delivery that's dynamic ping post, we just by default put a penny as the minimum for the ping price success. That way, if they do return success and the price is zero, it's not considered or used.
Got it. All right, thanks. So some questions from the audience here. Is there a way to send headers in the post request?
Yes. So the headers can all be sent here. There's an extra box, HTTP headers, and you can separate them different ones by a pipe symbol. So if you want to do content type, um, application JSON, pipe, API key, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that would send both of those. Um, do note though, we do automatically send the headers for the content type based upon the data. So if you select that you want to encode JSON, we automatically send content type application JSON. You don't have to type anything here. You can, it's not going to hurt it, but you don't have to go out of your way. We automatically put some of the headers, but if it's a header that's like an API key or anything like that, it can be done in this box here.
All right. And then another one was another one's related. If I send a lead to my lander from my lander to Boberdoo via full post, so it's going to come off their website, direct post into the system. Does Boberdoo have the capability to split it into ping and post to send to the buyers?
So yes, that Boberdoo handles all that just standard out of the box. That means it doesn't matter if a vendor sends you your Boberdoo system a ping post or a full mode, or if the lead comes from your website. And on the flip side, your buyers, it doesn't matter if the ping post or the direct post. Boberdoo is able to, like you said, split the calls into separate options. So if you do a full post from your website, say, or from a vendor into Boberdoo, if let's say it matches two buyers, one doesn't have a ping post delivery, one does have a ping post delivery, we would do the ping to the ping post delivery and get their bid, but we don't ping to the other ping post or the other delivery because they don't have a ping post. So all we do is grab the price from their lead filter set. That price is then compared to the dynamic bid from the ping post one, and whatever one's more would then be chosen as the highest bidder. So we do kind of do all of that out of the box to split them appropriately. That way it doesn't matter what your vendors are sending, what your buyers require. We kind of are an old school switchboard to kind of match those up and do it appropriately.
Sure. So while we're here, and if you want to go to the API specs and our dynamic consent API, there's a question around match with bid ID, which was, you know, this is going to be changes and integrations that are going to be coming with the FCC change. There's going to be, buyers, resellers that are going to have different specs. What Brett's pulling up here is Boberdoo's dynamic consent API, which, as Brett's pointing out, includes some additional things beyond just the traditional response of matched with a bid.
Yeah, so if you think of a normal ping post, right, there's the lead ID field, right? And that's how we marry the ping to the post. The ping response has a lead ID returned, and then in the post, you send that lead ID value so that we know the post is related to that particular ping, right? Same idea. In addition to the lead ID, you'll also have to send the match with bid ID in the post. So if I scroll down to an example of what the response would look like, okay? So this ping came in, it was matched, it's this lead ID, it found one bid, right? Best bid of $30. Now here's the bid ID is 111. This bid ID represents like this seller and this price and their one filter set. If we scroll down to multiple, well, there's multiple bids, right? Like this bid ID represents kind of this section. This bid ID represents this section. This bid ID represents this section. And so on the post, if you said lead ID 2222 and match with bid ID equals 335, that tells the system that you want to pick it and sell it to this one and not these other two. And so does the match with bid ID come in the buyer's ping response? That this is only related to,
I guess if it's Boberdoo to Boberdoo.
if it's Boberdoo to Boberdoo, the bid ID is still unique for each system, right?
Right.
This is relating only to this API that we're looking at here.
Yeah, this is the bid IDs is what Boberdoo produces, so that you can, as a lead generator, you can display the multiple partners, sellers to the consumer and let them select.
Yeah, if you can almost think of it just like the lead ID field, it's not returned from anywhere. It's just like a numerical counter almost that is just representing the bid plus the buyer. So it's almost just like a lead ID. Boberdoo generates it automatically just based on the number.
So Brett, while we're in the APIs, I guess that is another integration, although the other way, right? This would be an integrating to Boberdoo. What are some ways? I know we have a lot of APIs. What are some ways that you know that clients connect to the APIs?
Yeah, so exactly like what you're saying, we've kind of been looking at, all right, how can I do integrations from my Boberdoo system to send data somewhere else? This is someone else trying to get data from your Boberdoo system. So this might be your own tech team, it might be a buyer, it might be a vendor, but there's anything that says get on the left here, right? Is like give me the data, right? So give me all my filter sets, give me all my details of the lead. So that's probably a pretty common one, right? This one does require the IP address to be whitelisted, but you can by date, by lead ID, by a specific phone, like give me all the details of the leads, and it will return back all that information. So, a common use case is, we've had clients who have a reporting suite that they want to call Boberdoo system and essentially download information, lead information to pull into their reporting suite. So they have something that runs maybe every hour. They run this API and they grab the results and store them on their own end for reporting, internal use, whatever it may be. So get lead details is a big one, right? Getting the information out, the lead details themselves. But besides that, there's also other kind of neat ones that we've seen used for. Um, we kind of touched on it before, but like the closing of the feedback loop is kind of the next big option we see for other systems wanting to contact Boberdoo to update a lead or change the status. So we have a couple different options. So there's a couple different options here. They all say the same thing: set CRM status, but there's different options by the lead ID value, by the phone, by a combination. And so it matters then how the person who wants to call this API, so the outside user, the tech person, wants to call this API, maybe they don't have the lead ID, right? Because that would require them to know the the Boberdoo lead ID. Maybe they only store the phone number. So in that case, they would use the by phone because that's the value that they have on their end.
And by you say by their end, that's like the CRM.
The CRM, the CRM tech team reporting suite.
Got it.
Essentially, another system always will be calling these APIs, right?
Got it.
So what we mean by the CRM status too, if you're wondering, like that's for changing if it's a new lead, working lead, if it's closed. We have a couple specific reports, CPA by source, CPA by filter set, that will only factor in leads that have been flagged as closed. So you can really get a true CPA values on your numbers. And so this API is very simple to call and simple to use. So if you or anyone on your team has questions on this or looking for more information, don't hesitate to let us know.
Awesome.
This API, yes, it works for every lead type. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to send in the lead type ID to represent, and then the lead ID. Or if you're using the phone one, use the phone.
All right. Thank you. Yes, this API is product agnostic, so lead types, all that would be specific to whatever fields that you have in your system. So, Brett, there's a couple other integrations that we want to touch on just to end this webinar here. As far as I don't know if I would call this inbound or outbound integrations, but something that we think every system should have 3 integrations set up. If you could start with Twilio as being the first one and talk a little bit about what that integration does.
Yeah, so to start, Twilio is what Boberdoo uses for all of our phone routing technology. So,
well, the good news is this is typically a one-time setup. You're one and done once you get the credentials in. So that's why it's typically not even in our demo systems.
yeah, and so all you see on this page again is the SID and the auth token. So once you sign up under Twilio for Twilio Voice, right on that home page, it's copy and pasting these values to paste in here to use. Once that's done, that allows you then to use this phone routing tab in your system and click on the order phone numbers or the campaign, manage campaigns to order your phone numbers through the phone wizard. All right. So when I click the phone wizard, it kind of goes through the stuff here and allows me to get to this page to order a phone number. This page wouldn't show up if those Twilio credentials were not valid because this information is pulling directly from, you can search at certain numbers. I want to start with a certain area code maybe, or maybe it needs to contain some string. So you can pick your number from the Twilio pool and order them and assign them right through your Bobber.
Where else can you use those Twilio credentials?
Those Twilio credentials can also be used for SMS. And so
To leads?
to send the SMS to your buyers only.
Got it.
We do not have anything out of the box for sending the SMS to the consumer. However, we have seen clients utilize webhooks to do
Sure.
that. So
send it to the SMS service.
Simple texting, I think, is a common API service we've seen people use. That way you can trigger the webhook to send the text message from that service. But from your Twilio credentials, you can order SMS numbers as well. There is a limitation now. Twilio does require you to verify the number if you're going to be doing SMS. So that is a couple of hoops you have to jump through now. They did not have to before. Unfortunate, but we don't have anything for that.
Cool. So after Twilio, then how about emails?
Yep. So under your settings tab, underneath or above Twilio settings, there's an email settings tab. So this is what the system uses to send any outbound emails. So if you want to get a report sent to yourself, you want to get a lead delivery sent to yourself, you want to get one of those notifications emailed to yourself, you'll have to have something configured here. We recommend Gmail or SendGrid. Those are both super easy. SendGrid has a free account to allow you to get up and running, make sure that's what you want. Pretty sure the free one has a good number of leads sent or allowed per day. Gmail is another one we see used as well. We do have a standard kind of walkthrough guide for Gmail specifically. So if you do have, we don't have an API to Amazon SES, but you would plug in your credentials that you have for Amazon SES right on this page here. For Gmail specifically, they kind of will make you generate a new password. So that way you're not typing in your own Gmail password into the operating system here that's never shared anywhere. The app password is Google's, release in order to combat having to share those passwords. So all you do here is set the host, set the username, set the password, and then the last thing is the actual email from address. This is what shows in the email and who it shows it's coming from when the emails go.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, then the last one, and I'll thank everybody for sticking through us this whole hour. The last one we want to touch on is AWS. So everybody probably has a ticket in their system about data retention and AWS. Why do they care?
So
Why should they care?
with the Boberdoo system, we only store the data temporarily. PII fields are stored for anywhere from 30 days, I believe. Sensitive field is 7 days. PII is your address, name, phone, email. Sensitive information is going to be like social security number, date of birth, health conditions, anything like that. Those are only stored for 7. So let's say that a lead, comes in last month after 30 days, it gets scrubbed clean. You want a way to reprocess that lead at a later time. If you're integrated with the Amazon S3 that we hand off to you, there's a couple of extra kind of added features, including when we restore that lead, we can then restore it and reprocess it and then clean it again. So that way, if you're ever selling older leads, you almost need to have the S3 set up. That way it can reprocess those older leads. Besides that, the export feature, we call it the lead S3 merge. This allows you to pull a file for long periods of time or older periods of time. So I do one new task. I want it for this lead type. I want it for this whole year, maybe. Maybe I want just this month. And this will do all the leads and merge the leads. So by merge, we mean we take the data that's been cleaned, that's stored in the S3, and we grab the name and the phone, the email, we pull it back into Boberdoo and merge it with all the original details, lead ID, their source, all of that. And that will then be apparent in this file. If you only want to search for like only the leads that sold to maybe one specific partner, there's that option as well to then do the file. That will run right here in the system. We'll download the file. You'll need to be logged into your Amazon to access it. But that's the two main benefits of having Boberdoo associate your account with the standard Amazon S3. Otherwise, if you have your own S3, or if you have, or sorry, not S3, you have your own system, if you have Azure or something else, there are plenty of ways you can get that information out of Boberdoo. We've kind of talked about some of them, the real time with the webhooks, time reports, so on. That can all be sent out as well, but you'll miss out on some of these benefits if you don't have the Amazon S3.
Absolutely. And once you get through that transfer process, everybody's gone through the steps. It is a couple of steps, but it's worth it, especially in the coming, the FCC changes. You're going to need to save this data for longer periods of time. You want to have that trusted form or Janaya certificate, proof of consent with the lead. And then this keeps that in your account so that no matter what happens, you always have that information, and it's stored in a cost-efficient way too, because Amazon S3 is pretty cheap.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, Brett. This was the last thing I had on ours. Is there anything that I missed that you wanted to cover?
I guess the one last thing, just to really briefly touch on, is just that time reports option. If you're not familiar with them or not sure what they are, it's just a way to run reports already in your system. But instead of manually clicking them and saving them, you can just automatically send them outbound, email, Google Sheets, Amazon S3.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining today. Any questions that we didn't address during this call?